Okay, so I often get asked about my Neovim and my Neovim configuration, so I figured I'd do a quick little walkthrough. Um, Let me first, all my dot files and configuration can be found on my GitHub, which will be here, and we'll get a link in the description. But you can find my dot files at dmmulroy/kickstart.nix. Currently, I'm managing all of my setup with Nix, but I still use Lua and all that for my Neovim, and anyone who uses Neovim normally should be able to copy this. So if you go to kickstart/config, drop into the NVM or NVim directory, all of my setups here, and you can pretty much just copy paste that and dump that into your own project. I've also tried to take a lot of care and effort to comment a lot of my Lua configuration to explain what's going on. I had originally started this repo on my NVim configuration using TJ DeVries's Kickstart .nvim project, and then slowly expanded out from there. So everything should be pretty idiomatic and standard. But yeah, let's jump in, shall we? So if we look here, this is the root level directory in my config. It's pretty straightforward and bare bones and basic. I use lazy.nvim as my package manager, which is what this lazy lock file is. The entry point to my dot files is going to be this init.lua, which really just requires my specific user configuration. In the root level, we have these two directories after, which is the typical Neovim after directory. You can read the Neovim docs for what that directory is used for, but like the too long didn't read is that's the last thing. The files in the after directory is like the last stage of bootstrapping Neovim. So things you'll find in here are going to be things for detecting specific syntaxes or file types. I have something set up for ReasonML and OCaml. And then the majority of my configuration lives within Lua, which, if you recall, we import user. So if we go back and go look in Lua, we have user and then this init.lua. That's what this outside file is requiring. If we look in here, we basically funnel everything else up through this user init into the top level init, and that's kind of how my Neovim bootstraps itself. So in here, we bring in my options, all our plugins, which our plugins are loaded via this user.lazy module, my key maps, and then I have a bunch of custom plugins, if you will, or just like little scripts that I've written in Lua to make my editor experience exactly how I want it. So to start, let's jump into my options. That's probably going to be the most important. As I said, I've tried to comment mostly everything in here for what it does and what it controls. So I personally enjoy having relative line numbers, so I can see, for instance, like let's have a better example. Right now I'm on line 13, but maybe I want to jump 10 up. So I can just say 10K and I jump up there. So that's what relative line numbers does. I set up tabs to spaces. I turn on auto indenting with these options. I turn on some smart indenting and have a link to Stack Overflow for why we need this. We have incremental searching. I disable text wrap kind of across the board. I use my spacebar as my leader key. So any of my keybinds that are prefixed with leader, I am pressing spacebar and then my keybar to activate those. I set up how I want things to be split. So when I'm doing things like a vertical split or a horizontal split, those settings control that. I turn on mouse mode, so right, we can come in here, can do all that. I rarely ever use that, but I do prefer to have it on. We enable some settings for casing. This mostly is to help searching. I actually have no idea what uptime or update times does. So let's see here. Looks like this is just for writing the swap file. We set some autocomplete options. Our undo file, we update to 24-bit color. We have our sign column, which is this guy over here. So it's always going to be enabled, not just when plugins decide to put something there. I really hate having this off because if you have it off and you go into a buffer, or you're working in a buffer where, let's say, you make a edit to Git and suddenly Git wants to put symbols in there, it's going to push your buffer to the right. I think that's really annoying. We enable access integration with the system clipboard. We put a cursor line on, which is basically this line right here. It moves with what line my cursor's on, just easier for me to, at a quick glance, see where I'm at. We set up some fold settings, and this is mostly to work with one of our plugins. So I'm not sure if I can fold anything in here. Yeah, we'll go over folding a little bit later, but these are recommended settings for folds from NVim UFO, which is the plugin I use for managing my folds. Then scroll off is basically what keeps the buffer. I almost just pointed at the screen like an idiot. There's always at minimum 8 lines above or 8 lines below me as I'm scrolling through my files. That is what this does. The column line is just this over here. It's pretty standard nowadays to have a column width of 80 characters. So I just keep that as the default. And then right now I have this setting here. Most of you won't need this, and I'm not even sure if I need this anymore, but this is to customly configure the blinking of my cursor. I was having some issues in Tmux and Ghosty that I need to revisit, but for now it works reasonably well. Each thing's commented on what it does, and yeah, hopefully I can remove that sometime soon. So the next thing I want to go through is our actual plugins. So if you recall, if we look in our user init, we bring our plugins in through this lazy module, and we're managing all our plugins with lazy. So let's go take a look at lazy.lua. If we look at lazy.lua, this is going to look super similar to if you use Packer. We basically just set up where lazy can put data. We install lazy if it's not already installed. Make sure it's in Vim's runtime path. Actually load the plugin, and then we set it up and we import plugins. This is going to go look in a directory of this name. So to actually get all of our Neovim plugins, we keep it in a directory called plugins. And if you're not familiar with lazy, lazy ends up looking like this. You get a command that you can run, and it's going to bump up this window. In your view, you're going to get all the plugins you have loaded in your system, which you can see I have quite a few. And then some of them haven't loaded in yet because I haven't needed to use them. That's one nice property of lazy, is you can really configure it to not load plugins until you need them, hence the name lazy loading. That can help with startup times if you use a lot of plugins. We can come in here and we can do things like we can check if any of our plugins have updates. Looks like I do. So let's read through these quick. Some new updates to Tree Sitter. Great. Some updates to dressing, some updates to Lua line. Great, these all look good. So if we go back up to the top, we can go ahead and run update or sync. So I'm just gonna run sync, and that will update everything for me. One nice thing about this is you can also profile it to see how fast your editor starts up. So if you press P, you can see that Neovim in total starts up in 77 milliseconds for me. And you can kind of see when and where plugins get loaded, and Lazy gives you a bunch of options on how to configure that. I could spend time getting this even lower, but I don't notice really any problems with my startup time at the moment. So that's Lazy. So now let's go take a tour of my actual plugins. So if you recall, in our current file, we're looking for a plugins directory. That's where Lazy's looking. And it is looking right here, this plugins directory. So this I have a file for most of my plugins. So we have auto pairs and my completion stuff. So if we come in here and look, we load in the typical NVim autocomplete plugin, and this plugin is going to load when the buffer read post event fires or the buffer new file fire event fires, excuse me. We have a handful of dependencies in this. So we have things like integrating with our LSP, getting completions from our buffer, getting file path completions, getting snippet completions, some other stuff that make our snippets better. Let's see here. LSP kind, if I recall correctly, gives me icons in our autocomplete. So if we look here, like, I don't know, yeah, so these icons here, that's where LSP kind is feeding in. Let's delete that. And then NVim auto pairs is going to be a plugin that like automatically closes our brackets or strings. So you can see like when I press these, I'm getting like the equivalent closing of it. So that's what NVim auto pairs does. Walking through our configuration of this stuff, I probably won't go too in the weeds with a lot of this stuff because it's pretty specific to me, but here we're just setting up how autocompletes and our pop-ups work. So setting key bindings here, so I can like basically go through my list of key bindings. I can open it pressing Control Space, Control J and K, move me up and down through the list. I think I can also use Tab and Shift Tab. Yep. So that's what you're seeing here. That functionality that we just covered is what those keybinds do, excuse me. If we have hover docs for a particular function, that sets this up. And this configures our sources for actual autocomplete. So we get, first and foremost, sources from our LSP, and then we get sources from Copilot, and then stuff out of the local buffer, which I think I want to replace these around. Copilot, file paths, and then our snippets. This configures some of our formatting, adds basically just the symbols generally, and then ghost text is like what will give this is the ghost text here from our autocomplete plugin. It's not actually in the buffer, but if we accepted that, that's what it's going to give us. So that's our autocomplete plugin and all of its dependencies. Moving on, our color scheme. I use Cappuccino Macchiato. No idea if I said that correctly, but the plugin for Cappuccino actually is super nice because it lets you automatically apply your color theme to a bunch of really common plugins. So this handles applying my theme across all of that for me. And then down here, we just set our color theme. And this little bit right here, I'm not sure if I need it anymore. Neovim was doing some changes to semantic highlights, and it was giving me some weird visual effects, so I just turned it off. I need to go back and revisit this to see if I still need it. Moving on, our comment plugin. This just lets me do things like if I press GCC, it's going to comment on a line, or if I have a giant selection and I do GCC, going to do the same thing. We can also do blocks of comments. So if I highlight all this and I do GB, it'll do a block comment. Pretty straightforward. We also configure TS context comment string. I believe, if I recall, this helps integrate tree sitter into our commenting. Next is Copilot. I can probably remove this first Copilot plugin nowadays. I don't really use it anymore. And I've changed to using our Copilot complete or Copilot integrated with my autocomplete rather than Copilot being its like standalone UI and such. So in fact, let's actually just get rid of this plugin because we don't need it anymore. Save that. Next up is dressing. Dressing is a plugin which just gives some of the UI a little bit better of an appearance. So for example, like the borders around this pop-up window and like down here in my autocomplete, that's what dressing does. Fidget is a little plugin that's being rewritten right now. So if I press format or save, you'll see this stuff down here in the corner loading. This is what Fidget does. So that's all Fidget is. Git signs is going to be the plugin that adds changes to our sidebar for if you're in a Git controlled repo. This is a new line, so not super exciting. Harpoon, I use Harpoon all the time. Harpoon is a plugin that I can harpoon this file. So if I press spacebar HA, this will be in here now, and I can quickly navigate it to it. So to demonstrate this, let's add the previous file we're in. So if I press spacebar HA and then I do spacebar HO, we can see our harpoon menu. I now have 2 files harpooned. If I were to click on the first one, that would jump us back and forth. Spacebar HO, we are in here again. I can go back here. And now I have key bindings for up to 5 harpoon files. So if I press spacebar 1, it's going to take me to the first harpoon file. If I press spacebar 2, whoops, I waited too long there. Spacebar 2, it's going to jump me back and forth there. You can edit this menu in here, like you can just delete one out, save it, or you can just move them back and forth, right? And that will change the key bindings and everything. Pretty nice plugin. I use that a lot for jumping around file buffers that if I'm working on a feature and maybe I have like a types definition file and an implementation file and a testing file, I'll harpoon all of those and just be able to quickly navigate back and forth between them. After Harpoon, we've got Illuminate. Illuminate is going to be the plugin that highlights if there's more than one symbol with what you're hovered over, I'll highlight it. So you can see I'm highlighted over this here and highlights it down there. If we jump back to a file that has 2 imports, maybe here. Let's see here. Yeah, here's a great example. We have multiple require statements. When I go over require, it highlights all the other ones. And I think I have, if I press spacebar, open bracket, I can jump back and forth behind all the different symbols underneath my cursor. I'm actually looking to replace this with a different plugin, but I haven't yet. It functionally does the same thing. But sometimes this Illuminate plugin doesn't work well in OCaml files, which I write a lot of. So I'm looking to potentially replace it. So that's Illuminate. Indent blank line, that's what's going to configure these lines over here, I think. Or I actually can't even remember what this does. Enabled, show start. Yeah, I think that just helps with it file or like line indentation and this over here, these lines. Then my LSP setup. So we use nvim LSP config. It loads when we get done reading a buffer into memory. It has a couple available commands with it. We have some dependencies. So Mason is a UI for installing LSPs. So you can come in here and update and install new language servers. So that's pretty convenient and nice. Just updating some at the time. Then we have a plugin which is probably already loaded in from our autocomplete, but this lets us bind our LSP with autocomplete. None ls is going to let us have LSP servers for things like ESLint, Prettier, formatters, things of that nature. Neodev is just going to make writing Neovim code a little bit nicer for us. And then Fidget, again, probably don't need it in here, but it is a dependency. is what gives us that nice little UI down here. Nothing super exciting in here, just some custom stuff. So there's some messages I don't want to see from TS server. These are some messages I just like, these are some info diagnostics I just don't care to see from TS server. So I just have a list of the things I don't want to see. And then I intercept TS server's stuff and I filter those out. That's all we're doing there. This is a list of all the servers we want installed automatically for us with some configuration on them. This is going to be super specific to your individual like workflow and what languages you work with. So here we integrate, here's the code where we actually like bind our LSP to the autocomplete stuff. Let's see here. I have this function where we integrate our LSP with some keybinds, which this function comes from our actual keybinds file, which we'll go over in a little bit. We set up a command for just running formatting. And if you're a TypeScript dev specifically, I have this set up in such a way that if you're using both TS Server and Prettier, it's going to default to using Prettier to format your code rather than TS Server. That way you don't get like a format from Prettier and then also a second format from TS Server. And then we just loop through our servers in that block above, register them all. Here's where we set up null-s, which null-s is what gives us LSP-like capabilities for things like Prettier and ESLint. We set up some styling. We say we want Prettier, style Lua, OCaml format. We set up diagnostics for ESLint. We set up code actions for ESLint. Pretty straightforward. Some styling stuff, and that's the extent of my LSP stuff. It's probably the most complicated piece I have. Next is Lua line. So your Lua line is going to be this bar of information down at the bottom. I have, did I write this? Oh, right. I wrote a custom harpoon integration with Lua line. So you can see down here that has this little harpoon, a --2. So this is telling me that I have 2 harpoon files in this project, and the current file I'm in is not one of them. If I were to add this to my harpoon, you see that just incremented. I pressed spacebar HA to add this buffer to my harpoon list, which you'll see it's there now. And down here you can see that we're in our 3rd file, so that tells me if I want to get back to this file, I can press spacebar 3. We go here, spacebar 1, spacebar 2, spacebar 1, and to go back, spacebar 3. So that's how that little harpoon integration works. I had this for work previously. It will also show your Git branch down here. You can see we're in main. This basically just like intercepts that data. And we had a naming convention at work to name our branches like this. So I basically just parsed out the ticket number and then made it a custom branch name, so it didn't take up a ton of room. This is how you write a custom component for Lua line. Like I said, this is like all the Harpoon integration is. We brought in the marks API from Harpoon. We got the total number of marks. If there's no marks, we just return an empty string. We set the current mark to a dash, and then we go ahead and check if the current buffer is one of the marks. And if so, we just spit out the string right here, which you'll see like this is literally that right there. And then we follow the standard Lua line setup and add all the pieces we care about. In my case, I care about my Git branch, my Harpoon, the diff, diagnostics, our file name, and our file type, which is going to be over here. Markdown preview. This is super cool. I just learned about this, I think, from Rond recently. I have a command in my editor that loads when I go to a markdown file. So if we just quickly make a markdown file in here. Markdown.md, we save that, we go in here, let's just say hello world. We save, and I run markdown preview. This is going to open a tab, and it's going to have that in there. And it actually scrolls with you, does live updating. Check this out, like, and we can just, you can see it stays in sync with your editor. Super cool, very useful for editing markdown files. Let's delete that. Next is nvim notify. nvim notify is going to give us a little pop-up over here when asynchronous things are running. So for example, if I run this, like this error message right here, that is the kind of UI that nvim notify gives us. And then I just have some custom overrides and things of that nature in here, some custom styling, nothing super exciting. Next is nvim tmux navigator. So I also use tmux, and this lets me essentially switch between Neovim panes and tmux panes. So if I were to open a new tmux pane to the right, so tmux open to the right. So over here, we're outside of Neovim, but I can press Control H and Control L to jump back and forth between these. Same with Control J and K if we had buffers or panes above and below. And one of the other nice things is, that is not what I meant to do, but sure. We can close this back over here. Let's close this window on the left. Cool. So that just gives us integration between tmux and Neovim. Next up is oil. Oil is what I use for browsing my file directory. I don't use a file tree. You might have seen me already pop open this view. This is oil. This is how I navigate around my projects and explore them. It lets you treat your file tree as an actual like text buffer. So you've already seen me create a markdown file. Like I can say file.txt, save that. Yep, want to create it, boom, I can delete it. I could go paste it in here. You know, this is what oil is. You can also configure it to open in a buffer. So if we do a new split over here and then run oil, we get a buffer that doesn't go away rather than the floating one. And then these are just my key maps for oil. I highly, highly, highly recommend oil over a file tree. We also have Spectre. So Spectre is going to be a global find and replace plugin. So I can launch into Spectre like this. It gives us a UI over here. This will grep across your whole project. So let's say we want to search for dependencies, right? And let's say we wanted to change this to depths across the entire project. We could do that. I'm obviously not going to do that, but this shows us all our changes, where it would change. So super, super useful plugin that I use all the time. Next up is symbols outline. This is going to give us exactly what it sounds like, a symbol outline. So if I press leader SO, it gives us a actual symbol outline on the left over here. We can expand it, step into stuff. Yeah, you're just typical symbol outline, nothing too exciting. Next up is Telescope. This is probably like my most used plugin. If you're not familiar with Telescope, which it's like one of the foundational plugins in Neovim, this is going to be our fuzzy finder. So if I do like spacebar SF, it's going to let me search for files across my entire project, filter it down. I can also search my open buffers. I can search just a whole bunch of different things. It lets you fuzzy find across in that UI I just showed. So this is how that's configured. Next is Tree Sitter. Tree Sitter is what's going to give us really awesome highlighting and basically parses our buffers into abstract syntax trees and enables other plugins to read and interact with those syntax trees. In fact, can we, I forget what the plugin is here. There's a way to inspect, inspect tree. So here is what the current file's tree sitter syntax tree ends up looking like. So plugins will use this tree to highlight things, syntax highlighting, edit files. One of the most useful plugins in the Neovim ecosystem. Next is tsc.nvim. This is my own plugin. This lets you get asynchronous. In fact, you saw me run this earlier. We're not in a TypeScript project right now, but this plugin will run asynchronous, non-blocking, project-wide type checking on a TypeScript project. Next up is UFO. This is my code folding plugin, so we can come in here and like fold this, right? That's basically what this does. Just sets up some custom folding. Next up is Vim Maximizer. So if I have two windows open, if I press spacebar M, it'll maximize it, or minimize the other, or maximize the current pane I'm in, and I can press it again to have them equal out. So very little setup for that plugin. Vim Surround is a plugin where, let's say I have some text. I can say yank YSIW and then brackets, and it'll surround it with brackets. I can also do that, or I can delete surround, all sorts of things like that. So that's what that plugin does. And finally, Wilder. Wilder is what controls command mode in Neovim. So command mode is this guy down here. This is going to give me like fuzzy finding and better autocomplete and some different UIs. So that's what Wilder does. And then I have some just styling and custom setups that I've found useful. So that's all my plugins. It's quite a few, but it's still pretty lightweight. Like I said, I have a 77-second or 75-second. Can you imagine a 77-second startup time? 77 millisecond startup time. So my key maps are going to be under here. And again, this is a file I've tried to comment pretty heavily. So maybe one useful thing to cover first is I have these key map utils, which I actually think I'm going to rip out. I copied this from Primogen originally, but I think I'm going to get rid of them when I get some free time. But to go look at what my key map utils look like, I basically just give myself convenient methods for mapping different key combinations in Vim's various modes, whether that's normal mode, which is what we're in now, insert mode when we're typing, command mode, things like that. So that's all these do. Nothing super exciting. Some of them are non-recursive, which means it won't override underlying keybinds. But let's jump in. So we disable spacebar since we're using it as our leader key. So we can move in every direction, Control J, Control K, Control L, Control H. I can press leader Control up to switch between the last buffer, which is, here. That's actually not what I would have expected. I should probably change this, but save with leader key. So I press spacebar W to save my buffer, leader Q to quit out of the buffer, save and quit leader Z. I almost never use this keybind. I press leader E to open a floating oil buffer. I have a bunch of key maps for keeping my buffer centered when I navigate. So ZZ in Neovim is a keybind to center your buffer around your cursor. So when I'm doing vertical movements, which are all captured here on the left, I update them to automatically center my buffer. So if I'm going up and down, it's always keeping my buffer centered. That's what these do. These are some of like my most important keybinds in my opinion. Let's see here. I can press leader capital S to launch into find and replace. I can, oh, that was that one. If I just do capital S, it'll put me down here to find and replace in the current buffer. And then leader capital F launches me into Spectre. I have two keybinds for jumping to the beginning and start of a line. So I use capital L and capital H to jump between the start and beginning of lines. I use capital U for undo. So I can do undo there, and then this is actually more like redo. So if I come in here and I delete in between these, I can press lowercase u to undo it, and then capital U to redo it. So I thought that was a pretty nice convention. If I want to turn off highlights, so if I search for, let's just say, no recursive remap, I can look in here. And if I want to hide these highlights, I press spacebar, NO, turns them off. If we had diagnostics, I can navigate around my buffer by pressing bracket D or bracket E, bracket W. Let me jump around my various diagnostics in my buffer. So D will take me to any diagnostic. E will just take me between my error diagnostics, W for my warnings. We can place all our diagnostics into a quick fix list. I don't really ever use this. I do use these quick fix list ones. So if I did have something in my, if we do spacebar LD, whoops, it's going to put all our diagnostics into this quick fix list, and I can navigate in my quick fix list from in the buffer by pressing spacebar CN, CN, or CP. I can close it by spacebar CC, whoops, CC, or reopen it with CO. So that's how I use my quick fix list. And let's go back and fix that. The maximizer toggle I talked about before, that's where if I have two buffer opens and I press spacebar M, it's going to maximize the current one I'm in. I can press leader M again to bring them back to equal widths. I can also use leader arrow key to, or leader equal, excuse me. That was a weird little ligature there. So if I go in here and I press leader spacebar, it'll set them to equal. So those kind of do the same thing. Spacebar F formats my current buffer. Oh, this is one of the custom ones I wrote, which we'll go over in a little bit. So if I have two buffers open, let's go to a different one actually. So I have my options in this open. I normally am always editing in my left buffer. If I press leader RW, it rotates them. RW is the mnemonic that I came up with. You know, it's short for rotate windows. So that's what that does. Leader TC runs my TypeScript type checker plugin that I built. And obviously the mnemonic there is type check or TypeScript compile. So my harpoon keybinds, which we've talked about already, HO opens harpoon, HA adds the current one, HR removes it, HC clears all of it. See, if we did HC, whoops, HC, it's now empty. And then here's how I navigate between my harpoon files. Again, spacebar 1, spacebar 2, spacebar 3, spacebar 5. Got through all this. Oh, GX, I did skip this one. GX, if my cursor is over a link and I press GX, it will load that link in the browser. So if we just have like github.com/dmmulroy and I do GX, it'll open that. So getting into actual Telescope keybinds, I can do leader ? To show my most recently opened files. Leader SB I also use quite frequently for all the buffers right now. Like I've been in every buffer. I've been in every file in this project, so this isn't really a good list to demonstrate, but this will effectively just be a list of all the buffers I've opened. SF, again, like I said, all the files in my project. SH lets me search the Neovim help. So if I press leader SH, I can search all of the help documentation across all my plugins and across all of the Neovim and Vim. Super useful. SG is searching by grep across the whole project. So if I press SG, I can then just search across everything in here, and it'll grep really the entire project for whatever you type in. SD lets me search site diagnostics. I don't use this at all. And in fact, I override it right afterwards with search git files, which we also have up above, so I can get rid of that. SC lets me search commands. I really don't use this because Wilder gives me autocomplete and fuzzy finding on my commands down there. But if I did SC, this would also give me all my commands in this view here. Let's go delete that. Leader slash is going to let me fuzzy search in the current buffer. Again, I don't really use this super frequently. I just end up using the normal search down here. So it's there though. Leader SS lets me do a spell check. I have tons of typos when I edit. So if I do SS, it's just gonna pop up spelling suggestions. And then here's our LSP keybinds. So this is the function that, if you recall, in our LSP, we have map LSP keybinds in here. We import this function into our LSP keybinds to use, and we pass in the buffer. So if we go, if we go back, so these are all of our LSP keybinds. So leader RN will rename the current symbol. So let's see if I can just do like this, that, just rename that and all of that in there. Yep, we want to go there, sorry. CA is for opening code actions. So if I press leader CA, there's no code actions available. I don't know if I'm going to get anything. I don't particularly know Lua's code actions, but that will give me code actions in other languages. Pressing GD is my go to definition. GR is going to be go to references. So if I do GR, it's going to show me a list in Telescope of all the references of that symbol. GI takes me to a list in Telescope of implementations. I don't think I've ever ran leader BS. But that would give me all the symbols in the current buffer. Like instead, I would open up my symbol map over here. Project symbols, again, like BS, I just don't really use this at all. We map capital K to have that hover dock there, and leader K for that. Control K when we're in an insert mode to get signature help. We can go to declarations, and then TD is for type definitions. We've already covered our symbol outline. We've covered jumping in illuminate. So illuminate again is what's hovering or highlighting the same words. Keybinds for UFO. I map JJ. So if I'm in insert mode and typing, if I press JJ, I go out of insert mode. In visual mode, we disable space. Again, the same as normal mode. Using capital L and capital L and H to jump to the beginning and end of lines. This is a super useful plugin. So when I paste, we don't lose the contents of the register. I have these. If I press Alt K or J, I can move selected text up or down. We've got some indentation stuff. So if I highlight a block of text and I press arrow, moves it over and back. Or if we do equal, it just automatically does it. And then finally, the last stuff to cover is kind of all of my custom stuff. This group of files here. So we'll start with highlight yank. So in here, if I do like yank in Word, if you see how it like highlights that whole block right there, that's what this plugin does. So like when you yank something, it highlights that whole block to give you like a visual indication that you yanked something. Next is going to be format on save. And here, basically, this just runs that format command that we saw previously in my LSP file. So when I write, it's automatically going to try to format the file. Toggle ESLint. This basically just gives me a user command that I can turn ESLint on and off with. Up next is the Rotate Windows plugin. Again, this is the plugin that lets me do stuff like this. I just custom wrote it to the way I like it. It's one of my favorite things about Neovim is being able to easily write this kind of functionality that fits your workflow. And this was really easy to write. Like I just go look at the open windows. If I have more than two, I say I can't do it. Otherwise, I just swap them. Next up is resize windows. So this is an auto command that like basically as I resize this just keeps the proportion of the windows or the open windows in buffer in your Neovim buffers as it resizes. Next is vertical help. This just is a function that makes when I like, if I search for help, right? And let's say I just want to go to, I don't know, look at LSP stuff. It's going to load it in a vertical tab rather than a horizontal tab. And that's just a personal preference. Next up is this little edit text thing. And this just turns on word wrapping and spell checking when I'm in a text file, a git commit message, or a markdown file. And then toggle diagnostics is going to sound pretty exactly like what it is. If I don't know, let's make some errors here. You can see that I have diagnostics showing up in my buffer. So if I run my toggle diagnostics command, it will just hide them and turn it off. And then I can come in and turn them back on. And I think that is pretty much everything I wanted to cover. Alrighty, y'all, that's the full tour. Thank you very much.